Hey up, welcome or welcome back as the case may be. Hope this finds you well. So today we're just going to take a winter ride over the moors towards Kirby Malzard and Massam and just have a little chat about that last video, which I'll be the first to admit was a little bit sober and sombre and maybe a little bit dark, but it needed to be. And of course I tried to bring a little bit of balance to it by introducing a bit of levity towards the back end. And that levity was sort of at the expense of GS riders, but I think the vast majority of you out there that watch my channel and are GS riders took it in the spirit in which it was meant, friendly banter, that sort of thing. I think only a couple of people took offence. No offence intended. Yeah, it's satire. And we can satirise all sorts of groups in life, can't we? And to that extent, different groups associated with the motorcycle community, a fair game, myself included. Let's have a look at a few of them, eh? Yeah, we were talking about GS riders, or some of them, not acknowledging a wave. I don't know how much of that's true, how much of that's individual perceptions and imagination. But quite a few people said, oh, Harley riders do the same thing. And again, I'm not sure. Do they? Answers below, please. So, yeah, what sort of groups is it fair game to send up in a very, very friendly way, biker to biker? Yeah, so how about sports bike riders as a group? You know, one-piece leathers, and often to be seen sagging at the rear end in such a way as to suggest they've got a pair of cauliflowers down there, and conversations at the local cafe around what speed they managed to get the front wheel up at, and how many times they got the knee down on the way there. We all know it, don't we? And what about BMW R1200/1250 RT riders? Yes, high visibility jackets, flip top helmets, invariably either black or white, and underneath to be found a boom microphone as part of the on-bike or bike-to-bike comms systems, and conversations to be had at the local biker cafe about how they didn't like the position of such and such a bike in front of them, too far to the left, too far to the right, not adopting the correct position for the road conditions, etc, etc. Ooh, and are you in the IAM? No sir, not me sir. And then what about my group? Old men on modern classics, so often to be seen wearing wax cotton jackets and jeans, and occasionally rather dated looking lace-up motorcycle boots. Yeah, and their conversation at the local cafe around how many teeth have you got on your front sprocket? And I came flying down that last hill. I must have hit 40 mile an hour by the time I got to the bottom. And sorry I can't come out to ride today because my farmers are playing up. And there's no need for all them electronics, you know. It's just something else to go wrong. And who needs all that power? Waste of time. Yeah, you know the group. And of course these aren't all universal truths. Of course they're not. But they do sort of conjure up interesting images, almost caricatures you might say, and allow us a bit of friendly mocking on a give and take basis, and that is Yorkshire banter. Now, speaking of Yorkshire, I had a couple of people ask what are the origins of my sign-off when I give it I'll sithy. I'll sithy. It basically means I'll see you, catch you later, I'll see you later. I'll see thee, I will see thee. And it's a cross between Old English, I suppose, and a dialect rooted mainly in the south of the county of Yorkshire. So let's have a talk about Yorkshire and the Yorkshire dialect. That is dialect, not accent. They're two completely different things, because of course dialect includes words that don't ordinarily feature in the English lexicon. So Yorkshire, if you don't live here, if you don't know it, it's the biggest county in England and is so big that it's divided into 4 administrative areas: north, south, east and west, although for some strange reason they call East Yorkshire Humberside. But everybody that lives there claims to be a Yorkshireman, and with plenty of justification. So, no offence, Uncle Stuart, you are a Yorkshireman through and through. But the 4 administrative areas, they sort of differ demographically. So North Yorkshire, which is the biggest, North Yorkshire itself is the biggest county in England. North Yorkshire's largely rural. Its only city worth the name is York itself, and then it has some rather posh towns like Harrogate and Richmond and Ripon, and of course the coastal towns which include Scarborough, Filey, Whitby right at the top. And then below North Yorkshire and to the right hand side we have East Yorkshire. The main city in East Yorkshire is Hull, on the banks of the Humber estuary. And East Yorkshire, you know, it's flat as a bloody billiard table as compared with certainly North and South Yorkshire, which are rather hilly. But East Yorkshire's quite flat. And yeah, its major conurbation even is Hull, and that's where Uncle Stu is, isn't it? And these areas used to be called ridings actually back in the day, but maybe that's for another video. Yeah. So anyway, below North Yorkshire and to the left, West Yorkshire. Biggest city in West Yorkshire is Leeds. Leeds is massive. It's certainly the industrial and financial capital of that part of the north of England. But West Yorkshire, which is the most populous of the 4 by far, has other big cities within its boundaries. So in addition to Leeds, there's Bradford, Huddersfield, Dewsbury, Wakefield, Halifax, and quite a few others. So that's population-wise a very, very different kettle of fish to North Yorkshire. And of course I live in West Yorkshire. I live in Bingley in West Yorkshire, which is very close to the North Yorkshire border, which is why you keep seeing me up and around the Yorkshire Dales. And then South Yorkshire, major city there being Sheffield. There are others, of course, Barnsley, Rotherham, Doncaster and 1 or 2 others, industrially centred around the steel and mining industry in days gone by before they shut it all down. Don't get me on that again. And yeah, it has its rural aspects, but it has its urban aspects as well. So those are the 4 counties, but they have different accents. So my accent is a West Yorkshire accent. You might even call it a Bradford accent, as distinct from a Leeds accent, but it certainly is distinct from the North Yorkshire accent, which varies. And because North Yorkshire's so big, you'll get one accent down on the borders with West Yorkshire and East Yorkshire, and you'll get another accent right up the very top because you're nearly into Geordieland, because the next county up is Cleveland, and you're into Tyneham Way, Middlesbrough, Redcar, all of that. And yeah, and the South Yorkshire accent, well, that's where Alcivic comes from, because this thee, that and thine, in recent years particularly, has become the, shall we say, repository for that aspect of the Yorkshire dialect. So that's where Alcivic comes from, because there's lots of thee and tha and thine and other medieval sounding affectations. So there we go. Now, the phrase "I'll civvy" were made famous in the 70s by Fred Trueman. Now, Fred Trueman was a demon cricket bowler, played for Yorkshire and for England. And he also became famous in later years for presenting one or two TV programmes, including one called Indoor League. Indoor League were on ITV in the early 70s. It came on midweek about 3-4 o'clock, and it were all about pub games like bar billiards, darts, arm wrestling, table skittles, all of that carry on. And it were like a Champions League. And at the end of each programme, he used to sign off by saying, "I'll civvy." So I've pinched it off. Fiery Fred. Fiery Fred from South Yorkshire, of course. He were born in a place called Maltby, which I believe is near Rotherham. And they were also famous for a beer advert back in the 70s, Webster's Pennine Bitter, Fiery Fred, Webster's Pennine Bitter, that advert where he's breathing fire out of his mouth. Which sort of reminds me that back in the day, there was a great deal of rivalry between drinkers of Tetley's Bitter and drinkers of Webster's Bitter, or more generally drinkers of Tetley's beer and of Webster's beer, because they were really the two main types of brew which you could imbibe, certainly in my part of Yorkshire. There were others like Whitbread and Bass, but they tasted so much like piss that they don't really merit a mention. No offence, Whitbread and Bass drinkers, but tremendous amount of rivalry between Tetley's and Webster's drinkers. Do you remember? I were a Tetley's man, my dad were a Webster's man. Aye, Tetley's ample beer in the late 70s and early 80s were absolutely fabulous, were beautiful, until of course the money men came along and ruined it. But any road up, yeah, it were nectar. But there were that rivalry, and it reminds me of an old joke that always tickled me. And of course, it's Joshua Tetley and Samuel Webster. Those are the two breweries concerned, both Yorkshire breweries. And there's a great joke that Joshua Tetley and Samuel Webster buried the differences one night and went out on the beer and found a pub that sold both Tetley's and Webster's. And a few pints in, and Samuel Webster says to Joshua Tetley, "Shall we have one foot road?" And so Joshua Tetley says, "Yeah, I'll have a pint of Webster's." Hey! So Sammy Webster looks at him and says, "You're kidding me, why?" And Tetley says, "Because I don't want to go home smelling a beer." Hey! Oh, I love that one. Yeah, Tetley's. Now, there were also Tetley's tea back in the day as well. Tetley's tea, I don't think they were connected with Tetley's beer. Not so sure whether that's right or not. I don't think they were, but correct me if I'm wrong if you know. But there were Tetley tea, there were Brook Bond PG tips, there were Typhoo, and if you were posh, there were Twinings, and if you were very posh, there were them there Rington's vans, if you remember them, in black, gold and yellow, that used to deliver tea and posh biscuits and stuff. I think they're still going strong in some parts of those. But any road up, yeah. I mean, we were Tetley tea drinkers back when I were a kid. And adverts were quite good and all. If you remember Tetley tea, it was the Tetley tea folk with flat caps and whippets and all of that. And the PG tips, that were them chimps. Remember, do you know the piano's on my foot? Yeah. Typhoo put the tea in Great Britain. If you remember that one. And it wasn't until quite a few years later, actually, that Yorkshire tea came along. Yorkshire tea. And, of course, their advertising campaign were anchored by Sean Bean and more latterly by Patrick Stewart of Star Trek fame. And, of course, with Sean Bean, it were, above all, do it for Yorkshire. And with Patrick Stewart, it was that advert that always tickles me, where he gives this Shakespearean soliloquy at some member of staff's leaving do in the workplace, and he's clearly the boss, and he goes off on this Shakespearean monologue about Tina, how big the void that is you're leaving, or something like that, and he goes on and on and on. And I think the idea was behind the advert that he'd finish off by dropping into good old-fashioned Yorkshire dialect, so that there'd be a bit of a contrast between the two. But it don't quite work, because what he says is, "And we're having a pint at the Dog and Trumpet after work," and we're having a pint at the Dog and Trumpet after, after work. Hey, you got that wrong, Patrick. I don't know when last time you were in Yorkshire were, but what you should have said were, "And we're having a pint at Dog and Trumpet after work." That's how you should have said it, Patrick. After work, indeed. Who are you kidding? And he rode up. So, yeah, Star Trek, you remember that? I was brought up with the original series, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Uhura, Chekhov, Sulu, all of them, and guys in red shirts that always used to end up dead. But they were a reprise of Star Trek came along in the mid-80s, didn't it? With Patrick Stewart in Captain Jean-Luc Picard. Aye, Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the Enterprise. And I thought there were a bunch of imposters at first. I wasn't impressed with it. But I think one thing that they could have done to make it loads better would have been if instead Patrick Stewart, instead of retaining his best British theatre voice, just defaulted to his the Yorkshire accent of his hometown of Mirfield in West Yorkshire, not far from Dewsbury, where Patrick Stewart was born. If he kept that accent, it'd have sounded a lot better, wouldn't it? Because you could have had Commander Data shouting out, "Captain, there's a Klingon battle cruiser on the starboard bow," and Picard would say, "On screen," and then come up with, "Right, look at size of bastard ship, you better get it out of here, with warp drive before we get thrashed. Hey!" And then they off they go into the darkness. That'd have been far more entertaining, wouldn't it? And then towards the end, where they all have that cosy chat round Captain's seat, he could be sat there, couldn't he, with a pork pie and a whippet on his lap. Hey! And what about his number one officer? Him there, that Will Riker. Only played by Jonathan Frakes, wasn't he? Will Riker. I always felt sorry for him if they beamed down on the surface of a planet and came under attack. And Picard said, "Fire at will." Hey! Because he must have been diving for every rock he could have found. Just imagine him saying, "Oh, for Christ's sake, not again." Hey! Hey, good old days, eh? What's this got to do with biking, you're asking yourself? Old Wheeler is going off on one. What's he on about? Call the nurse. Well, it's just a humorous bit of imagery and satire to, it's of no real value, is it, other than to illustrate that it can be good humour for the troubled soul, and that Yorkshiremen love to take the piss out of each other. So, until the next time, ride safe, be kind. Oh, and before I go, yes, few of you have asked, that there Motor Gutsy V7 will be coming out very, very shortly. Stick around, stay tuned, certainly in the next week or two, unless we have ridiculously adverse weather. I'll certainly be out on that bike for the first time. So until then, yeah, ride safe, be kind, and I'll see thee.